What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here's my fantasy football advice for NFL Week 11. This fantasy football advice is for informational purposes only. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. Okay, in this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper and a stud for each position. And if you stay to the very end after all my picks and after I show you the Draft Dashboard tools, I'll give you my super secret sleeper pick that no one's talking about. Okay, let's take a look at the quarterback position. My Week 11 stud at quarterback has to be Carson Wentz for the Philadelphia Eagles playing the New Orleans Saints, who give up the 4th most fantasy points overall and give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Carson Wentz has scored 25, 26, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, averaging 23 fantasy points per game on the season, averaging 3.3 rush yards per game. Carson Wentz has a fantastic matchup here in Week 11. It's going to be a shootout between Drew Brees and Carson Wentz. I just think Carson Wentz has the better matchup. Now for a low salary quarterback that may fly under the radar. I like Eli Manning. Boo! For the New York Giants versus the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are the 2nd worst defense overall and give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Eli Manning has scored 20, 18, and 24 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game on the season. This is a home game for Eli Manning, which I'm a little worried about. I hope there's not that much wind there in New York, because Eli Manning's arm is so weak, somebody in the crowd could sneeze and cause him to throw an interception. So be careful with Eli Manning, but I do think he goes into Week 11 with low ownership. He's got a fantastic matchup versus the Bucks. He's going to have to air it out. He's got the weapons in Odell Beckham Jr. and Saquon Barkley. I'm going to roll the dice with Eli Manning here in Week 11. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all our DFS tools for NFL, and the tools for NBA are awesome. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. I like Saquon Barkley for the New York Giants playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who we know are the 2nd worst defense overall, but they also give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Saquon Barkley has scored 14, 20, and 26 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 8.4 targets per game and 14.6 rushes per game, putting him well over 20 touches per game. Lots of volume with Saquon Barkley, who I wouldn't necessarily play with Eli Manning if you want to go there. Saquon Barkley is one of the more talented running backs in the league, so if Eli Manning has trouble throwing in the windy New York Stadium, look for Saquon Barkley to eat up those yards and crush value here in Week 11. Okay, let's take a look at a low salary running back. I like Alex Collins from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who are the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Alex Collins has scored 11, 13, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games, averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting 2 to 3 pass targets per game, and he's averaging 12 rush attempts per game. Not bad for a guy who's going to get 15 touches. Alex Collins has a fantastic matchup here in Week 11. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. I like Michael Thomas for the New Orleans Saints versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, but they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Michael Thomas has scored 27, 42, and 13 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 24.7 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting 10 targets per game. He got 8 targets last game, 15 the game before that. Michael Thomas has a fantastic matchup versus a team who can't stop the pass, depleted defense on the backside. I love Michael Thomas here at home in Week 11. Okay, now for a low salary wide receiver who always flies under the radar. I like Willie Snead for the Baltimore Ravens playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have the absolute worst defense overall and give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Willie Snead has scored 13, 10, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games, averaging 10.8 fantasy points per game on the season. he's getting almost 8 targets per game. That's a lot of volume for a wide receiver at such a low salary in such a good matchup. I like Willie Snead again here in week 11. Moving on to the tight end position. I like Zach Ertz as my tight end stud for week 11 for the Philadelphia Eagles, playing the New Orleans Saints, who are the 4th worst defense overall, and they do give up the 4th least fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Zach Ertz is no normal tight end. He scored 44 fantasy points last game, 13 and 26 in the 2 games before that. He's averaging 21.8 fantasy points per game on the season, in an average of 11.1 targets per game. He got 16 targets last game. You gotta love his chances in this shootout versus New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees. I believe he's a matchup-proof tight end, one of the best in the league. Sometimes it's hard to fit these high-priced tight ends in your lineup, but how Zach Ertz has been producing week to week, it just could be worth it. Okay, now for a low salary tight end that had some nice production last week. I like Ricky Seals-Jones for the Arizona Cardinals, playing the Oakland Raiders, who are the 3rd worst defense overall and give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Ricky Seals-Jones has scored 10, 3, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games, averaging 6.3 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting 5.3 targets per game. He got 9 targets last game. Always has low ownership. Ricky Seals-Jones is playing at home versus a really bad team in the Oakland Raiders. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets in the end zone. Take a look at Ricky Seals-Jones if you need a low salary tight end here in week 11. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to DraftDashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. You've unlocked the bonus content. Okay, my super secret sleeper pick for week 11 is James O'Shaughnessy from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You probably haven't even heard that name before. He missed some time with a hip injury, but he came back in week 10. He got 6 targets and 10 fantasy points. He's a super low salary on both sides, playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are middle of the pack defense overall and give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. If you want to open up your salary for those higher price studs, you could roll the dice with James O'Shaughnessy. Not a bad option here in week 11. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for week 11. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.